every civilization educates its children and its young people in some way.
Yeah.
It might not necessarily be formal schooling in the way that we know it in North America, in the Western world in general. I'm thinking my late father apprenticed to a blacksmith in his village in
Oh wow.
Cyprus. I'm
Yeah.
probably the only one alive who can say that. Of his father. I'm only two generations removed from arranged marriage as well.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
their education itself, I think we need to look at as being part of a much larger framework that is conditioned by the assumptions of particular civilizations. And these
Mhm.
civilizations, as Samuel Huntington pointed out, are rooted in very basic religious beliefs that condition the way that we approach these matters. So I think when we're speaking of university education, I think we need to be aware that it's part of something much larger
Yeah.
than just universities. So and of course, the economic side of it is going to come into it as well. But I think that's a secondary consideration. Who is ultimately responsible for education? Going back to the ancient Greeks, there is an assumption that education belongs to the polis, to the city, and that
Yeah.
somehow the government is responsible for ensuring that citizens are educated in the virtues, to use this Aristotelian language.
And was that
Uh,
the polis is responsible in an exclusive sense or in a one role among many?
well, that's a good question, because I think I think from the perspective of Plato and Aristotle, they would have seen the city as being a rather um, totalistic community. I hesitate to
Yeah.
use the word totalitarian because that has certain
Negative.
connotations,
Yeah.
for the 20th century. Parents were educating their children at that time. Plato and Aristotle both were involved in educating young people. Tradition says that Aristotle educated the young Alexander, who would go on of Macedon, who would go on to conquer the known world as far as what we now know as Pakistan.
Yeah.
So when we look at education, we need to be aware of that, and that education is also rooted in certain worldviews. So is this something which is ultimately religiously neutral? Is it
Mm.
simply a matter of handing on technical capacities from one generation to the next? Well, that's part of it, but I don't think that's the whole of it. So when we look at something like university education, I think we need to be aware of the diversity of educational settings that we find in a mature, differentiated society, such as we have here in the United States and Canada. So, depending on your view of education or where you think it fits into the larger society, that's going to condition the way that you would approach the subject of funding education. Um,
Yeah.
if you look at universities as being arms of the government, then you're going to see that you're going to see that tax dollars should be used exclusively for universities that are arms of the government.
Yeah.
I taught for 30 years at an independent Christian university here in Hamilton, but we have a neighboring university, which is a provincial university. It used
Yeah.
to be a Baptist university prior to 1957,
Mm.
but then it became a provincial university, and it gets some government funding. So the issue of funding is going to be very important.